Something strange happens when someone leaves your life, but never fully lets go. You feel their presence in small, unexplainable ways. A memory appears out of nowhere. Their name crosses your mind at the most random moment. And deep down, a quiet question keeps echoing inside you. Why does it still feel unfinished? Because sometimes the story isn't over, even when the silence makes it look like it is. Sometimes the distance between two people is not the end. It's the space where something unspoken is fighting to return. But here's the part most people never understand. There's a kind of silence that doesn't feel empty. It feels unfinished. You've tried to convince yourself that it's over. You've told your mind the story that people tell when something ends, that time moves on, that distance erases things, that eventually the memories lose their weight. And for a while, you believed it. But something keeps interrupting that belief. In the middle of an ordinary day, their name crosses your mind without warning. A place reminds you of a moment you thought you had buried. A song plays, and suddenly you're not just hearing music. You're remembering how it felt when they were still part of your world. And the strange part is, it doesn't feel like a random memory. It feels alive. You start asking yourself questions you didn't expect to ask again. Why do they still appear in your thoughts when you're not trying to remember them? Why does the feeling connected to them never fully disappear, no matter how much time has passed? Because some connections don't end the moment people walk away. There are relationships that fade quietly, like footprints in sand slowly erased by the tide. But then there are others, the ones that leave something deeper behind. Something that doesn't vanish just because communication stopped. It's like a thread that was never completely cut. You might not speak anymore. You might live separate lives now. On the surface, everything looks finished. But somewhere beneath that surface, there's still a piece of the story that never reached its real ending. And when something remains unresolved, the mind doesn't easily let it go. That's why the memories keep returning. That's why the feeling still lingers in quiet moments when you least expect it. Not because you're weak, not because you're stuck, but because some emotional connections don't disappear. They wait. Sometimes the loudest battle a person fights is the one you never hear. From the outside, all you see is silence. No messages, no explanation, no sign that they are thinking about you at all. And when days turn into weeks, and weeks turn into months, it becomes easy to assume the worst. You start telling yourself that they simply moved on, that whatever you shared didn't matter enough for them to look back. But silence doesn't always mean absence of feeling. Sometimes silence is a place where someone hides while they wrestle with themselves. Because realizing you walked away from something meaningful creates a kind of pressure most people don't know how to face. At first, it's just a small thought in the back of the mind, a memory that appears when they least expect it. Then slowly, it grows into something heavier, a quiet awareness that maybe they left too quickly, maybe they misunderstood, maybe they lost something they didn't fully appreciate when they had it. And that realization is not easy to confront. Reaching out would mean admitting they were wrong. It would mean lowering their pride, facing the possibility of rejection, and reopening emotions they tried so hard to bury. For many people, that feels terrifying. So instead of moving forward, they freeze, they stay quiet, they watch from a distance. They replay moments in their head while pretending to the world that none of it matters anymore. But inside them, the conflict never really stops. Part of them wants to come back. Another part is afraid of what happens if they do. And that invisible struggle is the reason some people stay silent far longer than they ever intended. Have you ever felt like someone wanted to return, but something inside them kept holding them back? Comment yes if you've experienced this. At first, walking away can feel easy. In the moment, people convince themselves they are making the right choice. Emotions are loud, misunderstandings feel permanent, and pride pushes decisions that seem final. When someone leaves, they often believe distance will simplify everything. That time will quietly erase what they felt, and life will move forward without looking back. But regret rarely appears in the moment of leaving. It arrives later, Slowly, days pass, then weeks. Life fills with new routines, new conversations, new distractions. On the surface, everything seems normal. But somewhere beneath that normal life, small reminders begin to appear. A memory of a conversation that once felt ordinary. A laugh they didn't realize they would miss. A moment that suddenly feels more valuable now than it did when it was happening. And that's when the weight begins to build. Because absence has a strange way of revealing the truth. When someone is gone, the mind starts replaying what was once taken for granted. Things that felt small begin to look meaningful. Things that seemed replaceable start to feel rare. What once felt easy to walk away from slowly becomes harder to forget. Regret doesn't rush. It grows quietly in the background, shaping the way someone looks at the past. Each memory adds another layer of understanding they didn't have before. And over time, a realization begins to settle in. Sometimes a connection they left behind wasn't as replaceable as they thought. Sometimes the person they walked away from is the very reason their thoughts keep returning to the same place again and again. Coming back sounds simple when you say it out loud. Just a message. Just a call. Just a few words after all this time. But what most people don't understand is that returning to someone you once walked away from isn't just about reconnecting. It means stepping directly into the past you tried so hard to escape. Every moment you avoided thinking about suddenly stands in front of you again. The things you said, the things you didn't say, the hurt you caused or the misunderstandings you never fixed. And facing that kind of truth can feel overwhelming. Because once you open that door, there's no pretending anymore. No hiding behind distance. No telling yourself the story that it didn't matter that much. Coming back means acknowledging that it did. For many people, that realization creates a deep fear. Not just fear of rejection, but fear confronting the damage that might still exist between two people. They imagine the questions they might have to answer, the emotions that might resurface, the pain they might see in the other person's eyes. So instead of facing it, they stay where it feels safer. They stay silent, not because they don't think about coming back, but because the past feels too heavy to walk back into. And maybe you've experienced something like this in your own life. Maybe you felt that moment when unfinished history stands between two people waiting to be acknowledged. If this resonates with something you've lived through, share your experience in the comments. Someone else reading it might realize they are not alone. Because the truth is, sometimes the hardest step isn't reaching out. It's finding the courage to face what happened before. There are moments when reaching out would take only a few seconds, but it feels heavier than lifting a mountain. Not because the feelings aren't there, but because pride is standing in the way. You have to understand something about pride. It rarely announces itself openly. It hides behind silence. It hides behind the excuse of moving on. It hides behind the image people try to protect. The image of someone who doesn't look back, someone who doesn't admit they might have been wrong. But deep down, pride is often just fear wearing armor. Because admitting you miss someone is not easy. Saying that you still care after everything that happened means exposing a part of yourself that feels fragile. It means risking the possibility that the other person might not respond the way you hope. It means stepping into a moment where your emotions are visible and unprotected. And for many people, that kind of vulnerability feels terrifying. So instead, they stay quiet, even when the connection is still there, even when memories keep resurfacing in quiet moments, even when part of them wonders what might happen if they simply lowered their defenses and spoke honestly. Pride convinces them that silence is safer. It builds invisible walls between two people who might still feel something real. Walls made of hesitation, ego, and the fear of being seen too clearly. But here's the truth most people realize far too late. Silence doesn't mean the feelings disappeared. Distance doesn't mean the connection was meaningless. Sometimes the reason nothing happens is not because the emotions are gone. It's because someone is still standing behind their pride, struggling with the courage it takes to be vulnerable. Sometimes the problem isn't the connection. The problem is timing. Life moves people in different directions, at different speeds. In the beginning, you might both stand in the same place emotionally. You understand each other. You feel the same intensity. You believe the connection is strong enough to survive anything. But life doesn't always keep two people moving at the same pace. One person changes first. One person begins to reflect, to grow, to understand things they didn't understand before. Meanwhile, the other might still be caught in old habits, old fears, or a mindset they haven't outgrown yet. And when that gap appears, something painful happens. The moment that could have worked passes. Later, when the realization finally arrives, it doesn't always come with confidence. It comes with hesitation. Questions begin to fill their mind. What if too much time has passed? What if you've already moved on? What if reaching out now only reopens something that was meant to stay closed? So they stay stuck between two emotions, the feeling that the connection was real and the fear that the moment for it might already be gone. Timing has a quiet but powerful influence over people's lives. It can turn something meaningful into something complicated. It can make two people who still feel connected wonder if the window for that connection has already closed. And sometimes the hardest truth to accept is that feelings alone don't always decide what happens next. Life's timing plays its own role. But now think about your own experience for a moment. Do you believe timing can separate people who still feel connected? Write timing in the comments if you think it plays a role. There comes a moment when the focus has to shift. For so long, your thoughts may have circled around the same questions. Why haven't they reached out? Are they thinking about you? Do they regret what happened? Is there still something left between you? But the truth is, staying in that cycle slowly traps you in someone else's silence. And your life is too important to be lived inside unanswered questions. At some point, the deeper realization begins to form. This experience was never only about them. It was also about you, about what the connection revealed, what it taught you, and how it forced you to confront parts of yourself you might have ignored before. Painful connections often become mirrors. They show you how deeply you can feel. They show you what you truly value in another person. And sometimes, they show you the strength you didn't know you had when you were forced to keep moving forward without the closure you wanted. That's where the real shift happens. You stop waiting for someone else's decision to define your peace. You stop measuring your worth by whether they return or remain silent. Instead, you begin understanding that every connection, even the ones that end in confusion, leaves behind a lesson that shapes who you become. And when you reach that point, something powerful happens. Their silence no longer controls your story. You do. But let yourself be honest for a moment as you reflect on everything you've heard. If someone from your past suddenly returned today, would you give them another chance? Tell me honestly in the comments.